Let's talk about healthcare. If you're an independent adult, chances are you are paying your own healthcare at this point, but if you're under the age of 26, chances are you're still on your parents' plan.
Thanks, Obama.
But even if you're not paying for your own plan right now, chances are you will have to sometime in the future, so you might as well be ready for it. I fairly recently switched off my parents' plan since it didn't cost anything extra for them through my parents' work family plan, which is something that you can certainly take advantage of if you're under the age of 26 and you have parents willing to do it. But at some point, it makes sense to have some independence in your own healthcare, since you never know what might happen to your parents' job in that case, or whoever you're relying on for healthcare. It's good to know your options, or at least be ready to pivot. But common wisdom seems to be that you should get the best healthcare plan you could possibly get, and that is defined as something that has the lowest deductible, meaning you pay the least amount out of pocket when you actually go to get whatever healthcare you need. And if you have major health issues or you're really worried about something with your healthcare, then that probably makes the most sense. But that's not everyone, and especially for younger people who tend to have less health issues as it is, I don't think it's always the best approach. Now, let's say you're enrolling for health insurance through your employer, which is the most common way that people get their health care. After all, the government mandates that companies over a certain size have to offer insurance as a benefit, and that can be good for some people who can now get subsidized health care through their employer and they don't have to worry about shopping for it themselves. Of course, it comes at the cost of lowered wages, but that's a totally separate point. But typically, you're going to have a few options when you're shopping for insurance. You'll have usually a PPO or higher quality plan that pays for pretty much everything. You'll have a lower deductible versus something like a high deductible health plan, or an HDHP for short. A high deductible health plan is just as it sounds. It has a much higher deductible, but your payment every month is also lower, so it's kind of your cheap plan compared to the others. And I suppose I'll mention that PPO stands for Preferred Provider Organization, which is different from an HMO, which is another type of healthcare plan that's pretty similar. I guess it's sort of in between an HDHP and a PPO. Man, we're getting into a lot of acronyms here, but an HMO is a health maintenance organization, and that typically is somewhere in between a PPO with very low deductibles, high premiums, versus an HDHP, which will have a high deductible and a low premium. And while we're defining terms, a deductible refers to the amount you pay out of pocket when you actually face medical expenses. So if you go to the hospital and you get a $1,000 bill and your deductible is $2,000, you're going to have to pay all $1,000 of that bill, depending on what the actual terms of your insurance are. But that's a very simple way of how it works. Whereas if you only have a $500 deductible, that same $1,000 charge, you're only paying for $500. Your insurance company covers the rest over that $500 deductible. And that goes for any type of insurance. That's what a deductible is. Whereas the premium is the monthly price you pay. You can look at it like the expense. Now you might be wondering, why not just always go for the PPO if you can get it? It's the lowest deductible, and although it's the highest premium, you're going to be able to get the most coverage for whatever healthcare you might need. And that might be the best option for you, but you have to think about a little something called opportunity cost. Because whether you elect an HDHP, a PPO, an HMO, whatever it is, the premium is going to be different for each of those plans. And the premium is going to be lower or lowest for an HDHP versus a PPO, the HDHP, the high deductible plan. So you might have to come out more out of pocket when you actually go to the doctor, but your premiums are also lower, so you're saving money each month. Now, what do you do with those savings? Because the savings aren't really savings here if you're using the same amount of healthcare either way. Because if you're saving $300 per month on your insurance premium, what if you have a $3,000 bill at the end of the year? Then all your savings are washed out anyways. Whereas if you had the PPO plan, it would have covered that $3,000 expense and you wouldn't have had to worry about saving whatever's left. But that ignores two very important things. The first is that you might not actually have a major health expense during that year, in which case you've just been paying a premium for something that you're never going to actually use. I suppose you're paying for peace of mind, and that's totally up to you to value and decide what that is worth. But once you pay the premium, it's not like it's going into some savings account. It's going straight to the insurance company. They're keeping it, and they are definitely hoping that you don't actually use it. But what if there was a savings account that was made specifically for healthcare costs, that was tax advantaged and very easy to set up? Well, you're in luck, because there is such a thing. It's called a health savings account, or an HSA for short. An HSA is a lot like a retirement account specifically for healthcare. And the reason I say that is because you get a tax write-off for any contributions you make into an HSA. However, not everyone qualifies for an HSA. The only people who can use an HSA are people with high deductible health plans that meet certain requirements set by the IRS, though most high deductible health plans are going to meet those criteria anyways, but be sure to check before you run into that. And currently you can contribute up to $3,600 per year into a health savings account. So let's say you have this choice. You can go with a PPO plan that's $600 per month, or you can go with a high deductible health plan that's $300 per month. Guess how much it costs you extra to use the PPO plan per year? That's right, $3,600. Let's say you go with a high deductible health plan, but you still set aside that extra $300 into, this time, a health savings account. So you're getting a tax write-off for that year anyways, and then you can use that towards health expenses as they come up. So if something pops up, it's not as though the money is gone. You still have it there, and you still have health insurance, by the way. It's just that your deductible's higher, so you have to make up that first section of whatever the deductible is, versus if you had a PPO, you wouldn't have that. But meanwhile, you can invest those HSA funds into things like stocks and bonds. Of course, you don't want to get too risky with this, because if you need it for healthcare, you want to make sure that money is there. So I wouldn't recommend going into super high risk, speculative type investments. But while you're waiting to use the money, you can have it grow in some investment. And while you're young and ideally have pretty low healthcare costs, you can be socking away money into this HSA for when you eventually need to use the funds. Meanwhile, they can grow with whatever investment it's in if you decide to invest it. If you leave it in cash, you're still getting a tax deduction that year, and you can use the cash later on. Though there are penalties if you need to use it for things that aren't healthcare, though after the age of 65, you can withdraw without penalty, and it's almost like having an extra IRA, though specifically until you're age 65, you have to use it for healthcare unless you're going to pay a penalty. So that's what I do. I use a high deductible health plan, which has a lower premium, and that's compared to a PPO, which would have had a higher premium. So that savings, some portion of it, is going into an HSA every single month. So I'm still getting a tax write-off, since money used towards healthcare expenses is generally a write-off for most people. Talk with a tax professional, of course. This isn't financial advice by any means. But that way, while I'm relatively healthy and don't expect to have major medical expenses for quite some time, though, of course, you never know with emergencies, but that's why I have this high deductible plan. If something really were to happen, sure, I'd pay the few extra grand out of pocket towards my deductible, but I would still be covered beyond that point if I had major medical expenses. But for anything smaller, I'd rather just save the money anyways, because I don't expect to have many things popping up in the near future. That's why I think this is an approach that many younger people should consider if you're looking to start paying for your own healthcare, whether you have to or you have the choice. But that way, the money sitting in an HSA now can be used to save money on taxes. It can continue to grow in time with whatever investments I have it in, and then I have that money later on for when my healthcare expenses do come up. And to set up an HSA, all you really have to do is either ask your employer if they offer that, or you can go through one of the big brokerages, or I guess smaller brokerages too. I use Fidelity for mine, and that's how I set up my HSA. It's very simple to go through, just like setting up an IRA or a retirement account. The overarching lesson here is that you shouldn't cut corners on your healthcare costs, but you should look closely into seeing how you can optimize things. And depending on what your needs are and what your risk preference is, of course, this can make a lot of sense. It might not make sense for everyone, depending on your healthcare situation. I'm not saying that this is something that'll work for everyone, but I do think it's something that everyone should at least evaluate. Man, this was a dry video, so if you stayed along until the very end, be sure to smash that like button, since that would help the channel out a lot, and get more people who are looking for this sort of content, because I don't know who is, and I need to get more of those people to help out the channel. By the way, you should subscribe if you haven't already, since I put out new videos every single week about investing and personal finance, and I wouldn't want you guys to miss out. And check out some of the free stuff in the affiliate links in the description below, but until next time, take care.